Let me catch everybody up on what's been going on since, I don't know how long it's been. Has it been like 18, 24 months or something since we had one of these? I think it's been a long time. It feels like a long time. And during that time, I moved from Boston to Arizona. And let's see, I published a book that became a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller, my LinkedIn book. That's back there. And I've learned quite a bit about publishing and writing. I've worked a lot on that workbook. That was kind of the thing that was holding everything up because I wanted to finish that before I restarted these. And another reason the meeting stopped is I was trying to hire a book coach who would come in and run the meetings and be dedicated to the meetings and book coaching and the group and everything. And I tried some people out and it just didn't work. And I finally came to the conclusion, I need to just jump back in and do this myself for now. And I've been itching to do this for several months, but finally I just decided, you know what, let's just do it and get back on this because I want to help those of you who didn't finish your books to finish your books. Some people finished them, some people published them, but most of the people in the group didn't. And so last Friday I decided, all right, let's get back in the group. I sent out the email, got the Facebook page a little bit refreshed, and sent out a message. I wasn't sure if anybody would show up today, but here you are. So you get my very slightly divided attention because there are only 4 of you and Haley who's helping me out. So, well, I don't think I can switch this to just have us talk to each other. I would if I could, but I think it's in webinar mode, so I think it's stuck that way. So I have to go with the written questions, even though there are just 4 of us, and it would kind of make sense to just talk to one another. But I'm curious where everybody's at and where you're at with your book stuff. So again, you have to put this into the Q&A. So any questions that you have, but just put your update too as to where you're at with your book or what's going on, whether you've made 0 progress or you've made a lot of progress or you're working on a new book or whatever it is, put it in the Q&A along with any questions that you have. And let's get started. All right, Jean, I'm working on my next book after the Chinese honeymoon. So did you publish any of the other stuff? Because you had the other China book that you were working on before. I can't remember the title right now, but did you get that published or is that one that you still are working on? Kurt says, mine is on hiatus and seeking to get published by the end of 2023. This would be my first book. And all right, so Kurt, what's your book going to be about? Refresh our memories here. I think you and I have talked about it before, but refresh my memory, refresh everybody else's memory. Catherine, 0 progress, lost oomph, but clarified topic, ready to go, sweet. And Jean says, I published the Chinese honeymoon period, published on several platforms. I even got a sale on Drafts to Digital. Cool. And I know, Jean, you've been active on this stuff because I see your emails and everything. So I know you've been working on stuff a lot. Shlomo, no book, made a bit of progress in building an audience on Twitter, nothing crazy, I'm still learning. All right, I've also made progress building an audience on Twitter, but it is all crazy. If you follow me on Twitter, you know it's like I post very different content there than I post anywhere else. That's where I get out all my venting and political stuff. So you won't find much stuff about marketing or book coaching or book stuff there from me. All right, so, well, what questions do you guys have? How can I best help you to get your books restarted if that's where you're at, or finished, or make progress wherever you're at? What's holding you up? Jean, my biggest challenge is writing a better book that has more story elements. So how can I help you with that, Jean? How can I help you get more story elements in there or use story more? What's your question there? Or what can I do to help that come along? Catherine, how about you? How can I help you out to get this book moving along? And Shlomo, do you feel like you have clarity on your audience? Do you know what you want to write? I know we've gone back and forth a lot over the years at this point about your audience and exactly who your audience is and how you want to position yourself and who you want to be. So how's that going? And do you feel like you've solidified things there? Catherine, need to find my point of view, have a topic, but how to find that hook. So what's the topic, Catherine? Or what's the basic idea of the book? And of course, as soon as you mention the word hook, you know I'm going to pull out, oh, where is it? Yeah, you know I'm going to pull this out as soon as anybody says the word hook. Catherine, building resilience for executive women, banishing burnout. So I guess one question I'd have for you, Catherine, is how much surveying have you done of executive women? Is this something I'm assuming you've talked to a lot of executive women about this. I'm just curious how many, like, have you done a bunch of interviews? Have you narrowed down commonalities and trends that you see, or the words that these women use when they talk about burnout? Have you found common issues that they face or something? Catherine says, yes, probably 20, 30 women. I'm an executive coach. And so what are some of those, like, what's the most common thing that they say when they talk about being burnt out? Do they just say, I'm burned out? And if you probe further, what do they say about that? Like, what's the thing that they're walking around with all day in their head saying, I've got this issue, and if I could just figure this out, if I could just solve this one problem, that would solve everything. Is there something that they keep saying all the time that seems to describe this larger idea of burnout? There we go. Okay, I can allow individuals to talk. Do you want to just talk, Catherine, rather than typing me answers in the Q&A?
Yes. Can you hear me if I do that?
I can hear you. I think everyone can hear you.
Wow.
It's easier,
Okay.
isn't it?
Yeah, I work with executive coaches, and most of them are women. So that's why I thought I'd like to try to target my book to the women. They are burned out. Many of them want to just quit their jobs. They have no energy. They feel like they're on a treadmill. They're super busy. And yeah, the big things are they've lacked their passion, they've lacked their joy, and they are very, very tired.
Got it. And what do you feel like the solution is? I mean, have you been able to help them through this and solve this problem for people?
Well, the ones that have actually hired me, I have conversations, but the ones that I actually work with and are paying me for this service, a lot of them we're dealing with things like being people pleasers, no boundaries, putting everyone else first, themselves last. So ways of taking care of themselves. And this is far more than just taking a yoga class. This is like really looking at deep mindsets and stories that they've told themselves, and having to reframe the stories that they have really developed their leadership around. So how to make a shift in the way they lead and to still be effective without giving up themselves.
Mm-hmm. And so is there a common solution that the different women have found? Like, is there one thing that kind of works for all of them?
Oh my goodness, that's a really good question. Probably at this point, if I really had to nail something down, it would really be the way they can't say no and their boundaries.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting because I know a lot of people who have that problem. I have that problem too much. And I know that's really common, goes beyond women, goes beyond executives, right? I mean, a lot of people just don't know how to say no. They feel like they're mean when they say no. And so they say yes to everything and they get overloaded with too many things. I definitely do that too much.
Yes, one of my clients is a doctor. So I've also worked with doctors who run practices and they are burned out and they just want to find the way of resilient leading without just quitting and throwing in the towel. But I have found it tends to be more women that I've been speaking with. So,
So is there a possibility of making that more of the angle of your book or the hook to it? Like basically how to say no? Or, I mean, that sounds so negative though, right? But although sometimes negative is good, but is there a way to, I mean, I suspect there are people walking around who are saying, I say yes to everything, I can't say no to anything, and I'm burning out and I feel like I'm going to die and just quit. But I don't want to quit because I still want to do stuff. I just don't want to do everything because I can't do everything. How do I moderate? How do I say yes to what I should say yes to? How do I say no to what I should say no to? Where do I draw that line?
oh, you know what? I really like that perspective. It's sparking some ideas in me to how to say yes. Because Josh, layering that on top of everything of saying, having a hard time saying no and feeling like that's what we need to do as leaders. And it's all our responsibility. Being over responsible is a huge one. But then on top of it, you add this being in crises and in pandemic mode and all these things that people have been leading through in the last couple of years. So it's like it's compounded all of this. So they're in a lot of complexity and uncertainty, and that adds to the burnout and the feeling of absolutely being drained and not knowing how to make decisions and leading teams forward. So all of those things are really compounding this whole thing.
I like the way you put that, how to say yes, like how to say yes without burning out or something. Like it seems like that would grab the attention of the right people, wouldn't it?
Yes, and I like the way because it has a positive spin, but yet it's still dealing with what the issues are underneath it all.
Right, because that's what they really want. They want to know, how do I say yes, but without killing myself?
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. That'll give me some things to play with this week because I want to start building an outline, but I kind of felt like I needed a point of view or what's the main theme of this? Like, why would I even write this book? Because there's a lot of stuff on burnout, but what would be significantly different? What's unique?
Yeah. Well, I really like that. Anybody else have any comments on that? Want to chime in? I'm not sure if the chat's working yet. It might be working, but I'm not sure. Or you can raise your hand and I'll give you, let's see. You know what? I can actually just allow people to talk pretty easily here. So if you want to say anything, you can use that raise hand thing and I'll give you a chance to talk too. Not that you have to say anything. Well, good. Well, it seems like that's helpful there. Is it, Catherine?
Yes, it absolutely is, Josh. Thank you.
Okay, great. Do you have any other questions about the book or where you're at or what you're going to do in the next week or two?
Probably, but I'm going to listen to the rest of the conversation and let you know if something comes up. Otherwise, I think I've got a few things to get going with. So thanks.
All right, sounds good. Okay, let's see. Let's look back at the questions. Shlomo, let's have you talk if you want to jump in here.
Hey, Josh.
Hey.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too, or at least hear you. I guess I'm not allowing anybody to put their video up, but I don't know if you want to put your video up, but anyway, but.
I don't mind. Anyway, I didn't know if you intended to. Anyway, so I kind of feel that the right approach for me would be the audience and then the book, and not the book and then the audience. I actually published a book. Well, I didn't publish a book. I was an author of a kind of a book that had 100 chapters, and I contributed one chapter. So I have about 30 copies here. And it's even got a world record, that book. So I got something to talk about. It's just that this book didn't make any difference in any way to my business or anything. Although there were a lot of people promoting it, and it got to some kind of, I think it got a bestseller in maybe India. And so yeah, that's my experience with the book, and I'm kind of feeling okay. I probably need to have the audience first, and then somebody would care about a book, and I would know better what to write. I guess there's, yeah, that's basically it.
So what are you focused on these days? I mean, outside of the book, just for work, in life, has your passion changed, or is it similar to what?
If my passion changed, so I do, except of my coaching, I do niche website investing. I like it very much. So I find websites, I operate them, and like basically you flip them. And the nice thing about it that every person can find something that they love that's already is generating some kind of an income, and then build on that. And I know how to find these businesses or these websites. So it's kind of, I look at it as another way of investing. So this is when I'm talking about investments and different type of investment, that's one of them that I'm talking about when I'm doing financial coaching or speak about on public speaking. I spoke to thousands of people at the past year and a half on Zoom calls, just to the wrong audience, by the way, that I didn't want to develop. So these were Israeli, rather 60 plus years old, which are looking more of kind of pension questions and things like that. At some point, I got tired of that and decided to, I had a WhatsApp group and I just gave to another financial advisor. Anyway, so yeah, that was my experience in the past year. So public speaking, doing more of the financial coaching, but not crazy, and doing this niche website investing. And just recently, actually today, was we're launching a program. So we're able to get about 170 people registered to webinars to promote the program. However, we had 0 sales. So it was supposed to open it today. It just didn't work. So I was also launching that for the past several months.
Why didn't it work?
I don't know. So we had people coming, 170 new emails just for that webinar, presenting the program, and then sending a bunch of emails afterwards promoting it, giving a urgency 24 hours, and also during the webinar. It did not work. I don't know why. I collaborated with another coach. She was supposed to take more of the business side, and I was supposed to take the financial side. I met her at the Digital Nomads conference in June, end of June. Yeah. So again, that's also took a lot of my time. That's it.
Yeah, but it does feel like we're having the same conversation a bit that we were having a couple of years ago, of still like trying to figure out what is that thing that you're really interested in, that you want to dedicate your life to enough that you're willing to write a book about it. And I mean, I can come up with all sorts of ideas, but they're my ideas. They're not your ideas.
So as we speak, it's kind of, so when I gave my talk at the Digital Nomad conference, and I talk about how your finances can create the perfect work-life balance for you, for remote workers. And then I mentioned that niche website investing, and then somebody from the audience shouts, "When is the talk about this niche website investing?" So I made another there was kind of an unconference afterwards. So I made another session about that. There were people coming. There were also other people talking about the investing websites, but again, it showed me that there is interest there.
So tell me more what you mean by investing in websites. I mean, are these e-commerce websites that you take over, or like what are they?
Yes and no, because there are all types of those. I mainly speak about content websites. So there will be blogs, it will be review websites. It can be active YouTube channels, Facebook groups that you can take over the audience. The nice thing about all these is that they already generate some kind of cash flow, low, high, but then you already have something to work with. This is something that I like more than starting from zero.
Got it. So you can go find a website that maybe it's making a couple $100 or $1,000 a month, but you look at it and you're like, oh, they could do this, and they could increase that stream.
Yeah, and I know all the marketplaces, and I know who to follow, and I'm kind of part of that community. Also some SaaS businesses, that's also something interesting in that niche. So it's not only the content, it can also maybe operate another tech, either big or small company, have some kind of a software solution or any of that.
So is the idea that you buy these websites or you partner with the person? How do you do it?
Usually you buy. You can also maybe partner with somebody and be an operator for that website, and then you split the income. So there are different ways to do it. Usually it's more of buying. And what's appealing about this, that the cash flow is very nice with these kind of investments. So it's about 25 to 30% a year, except of the upside of the value of the assets of the website.
See, this is the type of thing, like, to me, instantly, this sounds interesting. I probably wouldn't do it, but I get it. Like, the proposition is very clear. There's websites out there that have value. You can increase the value by applying certain tactics. And here's how you do it. I mean, it's just like real estate investing or buying a business or something, right? And I could see there being a lot of interest in this type of thing. Is this the type of thing that you could dedicate yourself to write a book and build a business around this?
I think so. It's taking me away from my financial coaching. And also I have the imposter syndrome on this, because there are people who knows much more than me about that. So I learned from them. But from our previous conversation, it's kind of maybe irrelevant.
For sure. I mean, there's always somebody who knows more than you about no matter what it is that you're going to write about, unless you're doing a memoir, because you know more about yourself than anybody else. But when it comes to any sort of business stuff, there's always somebody who knows more. It doesn't matter. Maybe they're not writing a book. Maybe you're going to focus on it a different way. Maybe you're focusing on the same way. Doesn't matter. If you get the book out there and you get results, who cares what anybody else thinks or what they're doing?
If I can combine this with finding what you love, and basically that's about finding a website and a topic that you love, and then really, not ending up in a crappy job or doing something that you don't like, I think that's appealing for me. And that's for digital nomads would be amazing, because they're all about the lifestyle. They're all about living well and living the way that they want on their terms.
Well, I think it connects with that, right? I mean, this is an ideal type of business for somebody who wants to be a digital nomad. And so I think it still allows you to grow that audience by focusing on this niche. And it's not like you have to dedicate your life to website investing to write this book, but this feels much more tangible than other ideas we've talked about in the past. I mean, this feels like this could be a real book that people would really be interested in. It would help you to grow that business, because if you write the book on this, you're going to get people coming to you and saying, hey, I want to work with you on website investing. So you get more deal options, you get the best deals. It just feels like there's a lot here that has potential and then can lead to other things that you want to do.
Yep, it does sound like it, more than Well, I think that with the financial coaching, we had the problem of what's special about financial coaching for digital nomads versus others. You can say the same here, but it's kind of feels more right than the financial coaching.
Yeah. Because yeah, financial coaching, digital nomads, it's like there's almost zero connection there. Whereas this, there's much more of a connection. Like, I mean, if you went out and you said, I'm going to financially coach people, and what percentage of those people are digital nomads, it's going to be like 0.001%. If you said, I'm going to write a book about how to invest in websites and monetize these websites, what percentage of those people are digital nomads? Well, it's not going to be 100%. It's not going to be 50%, but it might be like 5 to 10% or something, which is still a ton more than 0.001%. And it fits with 100% of digital nomads. I mean, it's something that any digital nomad can look at and say, I could do that. That's an opportunity. So yeah, it just feels like there is much more of a connection here, even if it's not a huge connection, but it's enough of a connection.
Yeah, just so you know, so my 3 websites that I acquired so far are not related to any of my passion, though. I have a roofing website. I had a car antennas website, and I just acquired a quote website. It has 200,000 quotes. So that's, I think, the last one is the most interesting one for me.
Yeah, but it's still, I mean, there's the websites themselves. Well, for example, so one of the things I've been helping an entrepreneur to ghostwrite a book the past year or so, and his business or his philosophy is all about helping people maximize their potential, helping humans maximize their potential. And the great thing about that is, so he starts multiple businesses. It doesn't really matter what his business is, because he could do something that's construction or self-storage or marketing or literally anything, and he can help people to maximize their potential in any type of business, which gives him a lot of flexibility as to what he invests in and what he starts. And of course, he's looking for synergies between the things he starts, but he has a lot of flexibility. He's got a very large field to play in. And with you, with this investing in websites, it doesn't seem like you need to find any specific type of website to focus on. Like, you could write a book about here's how to invest in websites, or I mean, to me, this sounds so much more interesting than a lot of things we've discussed. And so, but I feel like you've got a big opportunity here to talk about this and be a voice for investing in websites. It's going to attract a certain number of people who are the people that you're really interested in talking about, the digital nomad type people. And then it can lead into other things, but then you've got this core business that, yeah, maybe that's things not your passion. I mean, I've got MWI, my marketing agency. Is marketing my big passion in life? No. I could run that business. I could run 10 other businesses and be just as interested in them, but I like it. I enjoy it. It's interesting to me because I'm kind of passionate about everything, but it's not like the business I would dedicate the rest of my life to necessarily. But if I can wrap that business up into something that's interesting, then that larger something might be the something that I'm passionate about, like maximizing human potential or something. So maybe there's a way to wrap this book and that website investing business into something larger that is what you're really passionate about, even if you're not passionate about that piece by itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm very passionate about helping people do what it really find what they love in life and then make a living from that. And that website investing is for me, it's the ultimate tool for that. It's just, there are so many opportunities out there. It's just showing people how to do that.
Cool. You want to chew on that for the next week and then let's talk again?
Yes. And last sentence, whenever I see a skating websites, I think of you.
Thank you. Hey, by the way, are you able to turn on your video? I'm just curious if that works.
Let me see.
Or if you try to turn it on, does it not work?
I don't have a button to turn it on. You probably need to do something.
Yeah. Again, I'm just trying to relearn all the Zoom tricks within this webinar mode. But I think I might have to promote you to panelist or something to actually see your video. I'm not sure because it doesn't. I'll have to figure that out. Okay. Anyway, for this meeting, We hear voices, but we don't see faces. So we'll go with it. All right. Good to talk again, Shlomo.
Same. Thank you.
I'm going to, let's see, look at Kurt's question here is next. Well, Kurt, let's just bring you on to talk instead of me reading what you put in there. So let's see. Allow to talk. There we go. Hey, Kurt.
We're actually talking in the flesh. I feel like I've known you forever. How's it going?
So let's talk about your book. Where are you at?
I'm the one who's on hiatus. I kind of like when you went away, I went away, and I've been following you. I've gotten a copy of your signed book on about LinkedIn. That was very helpful.
Cool.
So your timing, when I saw the email come through that you were restarting this, I was like, well, this must be karma, because I was like, 2023, I should make this, a goal to get it off the table.
Cool. Let's get it done.
Yeah, it's a bucket list thing for me. I may not be like a lot of others, including yourself, where I'm trying to publish multiple books or turn it into an audience. And frankly, obviously you'd like it to make money, but it's kind of more to undergird the brand I've already built. The multimedia program, Moxie Talk with Kurt Jacobs, and kind of what I've observed as a fellow human and that kind of thing. I don't know that it's a hero book, which you taught me that term years ago. But probably the closest thing I can really relate it to is Angela Duckworth's Grit. But hers was very, I don't know if any of people on here have read or listened to that book. It's very, I guess, intellectual is the fairest word I can give to it. I think it was really kind of a deep dive, and mine would be more relatable, I guess, just off the top of my head. Because I think there's a lot, the pandemic came along after I even had this idea, and I'll try to put this as politely as I can. I think we're in an age where, for lack of a better way to put it, victimization is kind of on a pedestal. And I want to show people that, self-reliance is it's not a bad thing. If you can rely on yourself and build a successful life, and, that's success is like beauty, it's in the eye of the beholder. But, I think people seeing that, maybe I can relate to this man or this woman, and see some similarities, because I think at the end of the day, we're all a lot more similar than we like to believe we are. I don't think the book is unique or profound or going to be a bestseller. That's not the point. It's more of just putting my thoughts out there in a published format. So, yeah.
Well, cool. And you've got tons of content from your podcast. You have hundreds of episodes of that, right?
Yeah, I'm approaching 400, and they're all videoed and podcast. Strip the audio out, and so I've been doing this 17 years now, full time 6. So it's just for me, it's more of, why not put this somehow in a book? But I don't want to do it cheaply, if that's a word, Josh. In other words, I could take 386 quotes or whatever and slap them in a book and call myself an author, for example, without really putting any meat on the bones. But at the same time, I don't want it to be, Victor Hugo's Moby Dick or whatever, So,
yeah. So where are you at right now, and what's the next step? Or
I kind of stopped when you stopped, so this is almost like a start over. I think what I'd like to do is flip the script, so to speak, on you, and just kind of ask you a question and see.
Sure.
What's the biggest thing you learned since we went dark for? I think you're right. I think it is close to 2 years. What's kind of either changed in the industry, or maybe what you learned that you were teaching that now you realize maybe isn't as relevant, or maybe is more relevant. I don't know if that's a fair question to put you on the spot.
And do you mean specific to book stuff?
Yeah. You said you had a lot in your email. You said you've learned a lot, and I know you published that book, and maybe you could give us all some tips or tricks of some of the things that we, can fall prey to, if you will, since we don't have maybe the background that we could or should, to publish a book.
Sure. A lot of the stuff I learned was like tiny little technical details here and there. Just a lot of stuff about how to navigate the book publishing process.
Yeah.
There's a ton of that stuff. So when I think like, what's the big lesson that I learned? I'm not sure if there's any big lesson that I learned, although a lot of big lessons were definitely like hammered into my head over and over.
Yeah.
And probably the biggest one, and I know I used to say this all the time, because I used to talk about building an email list and building an audience first, so
Right.
that when you put your book out there, people actually want to buy it. There's an audience for it. And that's definitely been hammered into me over and over again. The more I've worked with my own stuff, with other people, I just see that over and over, that if people have an audience who will buy that book, and it doesn't have to be big, but just even a couple hundred people who will buy the book, it's huge.
Yeah.
And the thing I hate is when somebody releases a book and then they sell like 5 copies or something. Because
Mhm.
like, you can stick it up on Amazon, and you can even run Amazon ads, which is another technical thing I've been learning a ton about, is how to run Amazon ads for books. You can run Amazon ads, but chances are, best case scenario, you're going to sell maybe a couple dozen a month
Mhm.
that way. And we want to be in the realm where we're selling hundreds of books a month, thousands of books a month. And to get there, it all starts with having that audience first, which for you, it's great because you've got this podcast you've been running for so long.
Yeah, I've got a pretty good audience. I mean, of course, I'm subjective. Somebody else could argue otherwise. I mean, I don't know that I'll sell thousands of books of this when it's done, but I could see selling somewhere between 500 and 1,000.
Mhm.
And I would be happy with it. But to your point, yeah, I don't think you'd want to go to all this effort and sell 5 or 10, regardless of what your topic is. It would
Yeah.
be kind of deflating.
No, it's just too much work. I mean, we all
Yeah.
say, oh, if it just changes one life, then it's all worth it. But to be
Mhm.
honest, nobody's happy if just one person buys the book
Exactly.
and says, oh, it was amazing, it changed my life. You hear that once and you're like, oh, that's great. But if you only hear it once, you're still going to be disappointed, because
Sure.
you want it to have a bigger impact than that. Do you have an email list that goes along with your podcast, or do you have
Yeah,
any?
I do. So, I mean, let's say the book's done. I have a pretty built in, I would say there's probably close to 10,000 in my email database. I've got,
That's
pretty,
fantastic.
pretty solid YouTube. That's all yeoman's, sweat equity of 17 years of building it. So, I mean, none of that was overnight.
Mhm.
But I mean, I do have a built-in audience that I think, depending on the book cover, and I know I don't want to get too far in the weeds on our first call back, but I mean, I know there's a lot of things I think that can help sell the book, not to make light of what's in the book, but um, little tips and tricks that, I kind of want to listen to you as we get back into this, that can help sell your book. Don't make it too big. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you said, like, what was it back 2 years ago, 89 or 109 pages is kind of the sweet spot. Those kind of tips, to where I can kind of go, okay, I've done these 4 or 5 bullet things that work really well in early 21st century publishing, and then if it doesn't succeed, you've done hopefully the best you can do under the environment you're in.
Yeah. Well, the audience is the big one. All the other
Yeah.
stuff coming, I mean, it's having your audience, it's actually producing a good book. I mean, the content of the book, and then
Mhm.
it's all the technical publishing stuff. You put all that together and you've got a winner. And you've already got the audience. The content is something that we can talk about more on these
Sure.
calls. And then the technical part about putting the book together, like, that's the stuff that I've really got in my brain now.
Yeah.
Because I've been through that process a bunch now, and it's kind of a nightmare. There's like 200 pieces to fit all together in the right order.
Wow.
But I've done it now. So I'm like, okay, I need to that's part of why I wanted to get these calls going again, is I'm
Sure.
like, man, I've been through this and it's tough, but I can make this easy for people. So
Yeah, I
um,
mean, I think for me, just getting back in the groove. I mean, I know how my brain works. I'm going to now go back into the workbook, and we've got the big holiday week coming up next week for most of us, and it's a good time to peel it back open and get my head around it going into the new year. So, yeah, I'm definitely. This has always been something I've wanted to get done for, gosh, probably about 5 years. And every year I live longer, it has a little more. I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Can't think of it. Richer, has more color to it because I've got more experiences, that I can add into it.
well, you said you have a tentative title, Moxie Matters. You're
Yep.
going to rely a lot on your podcast content.
Correct.
It sounds like the next step is to get a simple outline put together, just
Exactly.
outlining the chapters. Is that where you feel
Yep.
like that?
I do. And that's kind of where I think we left off. I was just getting comfortable. And then kind of like yourself, life got in the way, and the next thing you know, it's 2 years. And I think that's probably every budding author's dilemma is like, next thing you know, time goes by. But no, I think that's a great idea. I assume we're not going to meet next week because of the holiday, but I will definitely get the workbook back out. I think you made a comment earlier that you've beefed up the workbook quite a bit over this downtime.
Yeah, I don't know when the last time is that you saw it, but it's actually too big. It's like
really?
To scale it way back, but that's how it goes sometimes. You dump everything out and then you edit it back. But and actually I do want to have this meeting next week. If people show up, great.
Sure.
If nobody shows up, that's fine. But if you could get a 1-page outline done that doesn't have to be set in stone, it's just a rough, you can switch it around.
I will do it because I know if I put it on paper, that's the way my brain works.
But that's what I would love to see from you. If you can come back next week and have a 1-page outline that, again, is subject to change, I think that would be a great next step, because once you get the thin outline done, then you can start filling it in. And the more you fill it in, it just gets easier and easier, and you see where the holes are. And then it's like a coloring book. You're just filling in the blanks, but the guidelines are already.
I remember that you talking about that before. So, that's great. I think I'll stop here. If anybody else wants to jump in for the value of time.
Great. Well, it's great to talk to you, Kurt.
You too, man. I loved your book, by the way. If they haven't gotten it, the LinkedIn book was very helpful.
Yeah.
For different reasons, but very helpful.
I think everybody here should have gotten a copy of it. And if you didn't get a copy of it, let me know, because I need to get you a copy. Man, here's a lesson for everybody. If you do any sort of book giveaway or you're mailing books to people like yourself, do not do international shipping, which is tough if you're like in Israel, like Shlomo, because it's like Israel's a small place and you want to send it to all sorts of other places. But I did this this thing where people pre-ordered the book, and I had no restrictions on where they were. So I had people in Africa and China and Israel and all over. Well, some of these places, it's like $80 to ship a book there, and then it comes back undeliverable. And they don't give you the $80 back. So I had so many issues with international shipping where it was just a nightmare trying to get books to people in other countries, that now if I ever do that again, it's going to be like, okay, I'm doing this pre-order thing, but this is US and Canada only or something like that. Because I spent so much money on shipping and so much time trying to figure out how to get these books to people. And I'm sure there's some people who are still like, he never sent me that book. And it's like, I sent it 4 times and it kept coming back. But anyway. All right. Thanks, Kurt. And Gene, let's get you on here.
Hey, Josh, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Good to talk.
So first of all, good to see you again. Couple comments. Moxie Matters is a great title. Just wanted to say that. And since public book, I get a lot of questions because I published a book, and I wanted to give an answer that people say, well, how do you sit down and write a book? And my answer is, you pre-sell your book. That forces you to write it and publish it.
Well, that's what it did for me. It still took me like 2 years to get it out, but I did get it out because of that commitment.
Yeah, I mean, I only sold like 26 copies on Publishizer, but even though it was only 26 copies, it still forced me to finish it because I pre-sold it. So that's a great way to force yourself to do a book. I also have a comment about your international shipping.
Yes, please.
So I had to do a lot of international shipping to China and different places with the 26 pre-orders that I have. Amazon allows you to ship author copies using their platform. They charge you very minimal for shipping, and they charge you your own rate for an author copy. So my cost to ship a book to China was $2.60 for the author price for the book, plus whatever their Amazon fulfillment service is to China.
That's a good tip there. And if I could have done that, I would. The problem is I promised everybody signed copies, so I had to sign it and actually hold the book. And I
Oh,
was still stuck, but
wow, that's a
what I should
big
have
promise, signed copies.
yeah. So yeah, I should have done that and said I'll do signed copies within North America, but everywhere else I'll send it to you on Amazon or something. That would have been
Yeah,
great.
shipping yourself is crazy, even in the United States, because I bought a lot of copies of my own book to ship out. And then I realized that if I take this book to UPS or Federal Express or anywhere to ship it out, it still costs me like more than the cost of the book to ship it domestically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's why you see this stuff where people give away the books and they're like, oh, you have to pay a shipping and it's like $8. And you're like, well, wait, they're just getting me to pay for the book, but in a different way. But you see like Russell Brunson and all these ClickFunnels people like giving away their books, Dean Graziosi or whatever. But it's like, that really is just the shipping cost. Because the book itself, they probably paid, I mean, they're doing such bulk, they're probably paying like $1 or $2 for the actual book. And then they're paying $7 or $8 to ship it, plus handling and all that. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Amazon
so back
really
to my
has a corner on that market.
so Amazon can be your ally in that regard. So back to a question, I don't know how long I'm gonna run this, but what I'm struggling with my next book is making it more interesting and readable. My goal, let's just, if we divide my priorities up, my goal is not to sell more books. My goal is actually to get more people to actually finish reading the book. So I want to write a more interesting book. The problem is, or the challenge is because it's a business book, how do I make a business book more interesting? So I was wondering if you could click on the link. One of the things that I've done is I'm keep on changing the subtitle. And when the subtitle of the book changes, so does the narrative. And the original subtitle of this book, which is a follow-up to the first book, is After the Chinese Honeymoon, Communicate Effectively in Any Language and Get the Most Out of Your Chinese Cooperation, Predictably. So that was my kind of dry subtitle that really gets down to exactly what this book offers. But as I'm releasing kind of parts of the book as I go, and you can see on this page, I'm publishing me reading parts of the book. I've decided to try to change the narrative. And I just wanted to see what you think of the original subtitle, which is boring, but is right up my alley as far as my expertise, or this subtitle, which says Discover the Realities of Modern Chinese Culture on Love, Relationships, and Business. And it will tell more personal stories. And what I say quasi-fictional is a lot of the things that happen in China are very kind of salacious, to find a word. And some of those might have happened to me personally, or it could just be me knowing that this happened to somebody else. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to combine some of those actual things that happen that are kind of a little bit salacious, a little bit naughty, a little bit kind of what you're really going to experience as a man doing business in China or anybody doing business in China, and try to incorporate that not as an autobiography of my experiences, but almost like a quasi-fictional story of things that I know happen in China, whether they happen to me personally or not, in order to write a more interesting book. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts about the two subtitles and what you think about that.
Sure. By the way, is the screen showing? Can you see your book page?
Yeah. So you're seeing the alternative subtitle where I don't want to just write a quote unquote business book. I want anybody who has any interest in what's going on in China and what life would be like there might want to pick up this book and read it.
Right. Okay. So This kind of goes back to the conversation that Catherine and I were having at the beginning, which is whenever I look at a book title, book cover, what a book's about, the angle on the book, I'm always asking, what is the problem this solves? What is the need somebody has that they're walking around all day long complaining about, saying, if I could just figure this thing out, if I could just solve this problem, if I could just take care of this. And then they see your book and they say, that's it. That is the solution to my problem, that hook. And so how does your book fit into this? Like, what is the problem that somebody has that your book is the answer to?
Yeah, so that's exactly it. So if I were to address that question, Josh, that you just posed straight on, that was my original boring subtitle. And that subtitle was basically communicate effectively in any language and get the most out of Chinese cooperation predictably. That was a subtitle. It describes verbatim what you get out of this book, whether you speak Chinese or you don't speak Chinese. How do you communicate most effectively and get the most out of your cooperation? And how do you do that predictably? That is what this book is all about. But my dilemma is, do I want to use that subtitle that directly addresses what problem my book solves? Or do I want to write a more interesting book about the real experiences in China and tell more of a narrative versus kind of explaining cultural concepts and business concepts and case studies, and this is why this happens? It's the balance. Do I want to write a book that's more story oriented and more readable by people with just a passing interest in China? Or do I want to write a business book where people can go there and they have their call to actions and they learn exactly what they need to learn in order to succeed in their next negotiations? Which book am I writing is what I'm struggling with right now.
Well, I always lean towards I want to solve a problem rather than satisfy somebody's curiosity. Yeah, you could write about a book about China that might appeal to people who are just curious about what it's like, but they have no plans to go there. They have no plans to do business there. But those people don't need your book. That's something that it's entertainment, it's relaxation versus for myself. I mean, when I moved to China, I was reading books on China because I was like, what am I getting into? What am I going to be dealing with? What do I have to be prepared for? How can I hit the ground running? And I was asking myself all these questions because I just had no clue. I'd never been there. And so for me, I was looking for books that solved the problem of, here's what you need to know if you're new to doing business in China type stuff. And there are a bunch of those books out there, right? And
do you remember which book you felt was the most valuable for you? Do you remember the title of that book?
No, I don't, because I didn't find any one book that I really liked. It was kind of like I found YouTube videos, I found stuff that was helpful, or at least seemed helpful. The funny thing is that once I got to China and spent like a week there, I realized that a lot of that stuff didn't apply to my situation. And it was like, okay, maybe this is helpful for somebody else, but this is not at all what I'm experiencing on the ground here in China. And so I never really found something, but I'm looking at your book and I'm thinking, well, I mean, I was married and I had kids, so love and relationships probably wouldn't have appealed to me because it's like, well, that's not what I'm going to China for, and I'm not getting into that in China. For me, it was all about doing business and living in China, doing business in China. I mean, I was worried about things like you hear like, oh, if you don't drink alcohol, then people are offended and it can ruin a business deal. And I don't drink. So it was like, well, how do I deal with that type of situation? But there were just other things about how to be respectful and how to talk to people, and there are things that I didn't know that ended up coming back to bite me, like where I was trying to do business deals and I was pushing, and people kept kind of saying yes, but not really and stuff. And it wasn't until later that I learned more about the culture and realized I was talking to people the wrong way by being so pushy and so just like, let's just get this done type of thing.
Josh, let me ask you this question. Do you remember a single name of an author of a book you read or an influencer about China of a video you watched. Do you even recall a single person's name who either produced a video that you watched before you went to China or wrote a book before you went to China? Do you even recall anybody's name?
I remember that I went to a live presentation by a guy whose last name was McGregor. He used to write for the Wall Street Journal and he lived in Beijing for like 20 years. And he said some really interesting, helpful things. I can't remember his first name, but I don't know. I'm at that age where I'm forgetting names these days. And so, but no, like none of the books really stood out to me and made an impression.
So this is really good feedback, Josh, because my, let's just call it my level of self-awareness about what I'm trying to accomplish by writing a book or creating content is your exact experience.
Mhm.
There is just so much information out there, and everybody needs something slightly different. Everybody's going there for a slightly different purpose. And so it really makes it really is who is your exact audience? Like, even if I was writing a book for you as my ideal prospect or ideal reader, maybe you would have saw this title with the other book and you might have found it interesting, right? If your subtitle was communicate effectively in any language, you didn't speak very good Mandarin before you went, and get the most out of your Chinese cooperation predictably there for business, that subtitle probably was written exactly for you.
Yeah, I mean,
But in the end, anyway, I just wanted that your feedback is just really valuable. You're somebody who went to China, you did research before you went. I'm still trying to answer in my mind, am I writing this book for you, or am I trying to target a different audience?
yeah, and I mean, that's a really good question. What we do know is there are a ton of people going to do business in China, right? There are a ton of people traveling back and forth. By the way, I know we're up against the end of the hour. I'm just going to stay here for a little bit. So, but if people need to drop off, I understand. But what keeps coming to mind for me, Gene, is this book, which I think I've talked about before, but this book, Exactly What to Say, like, this is what I wish I would have had for China, like exactly what to say and do in China if you're a new businessman coming from a Western culture. And this isn't a thick book, like this is a super short book. This is what, 120 pages, and most of the pages are like big print stuff like this. But this book is just like business, sales, marketing situations, and it's literally what the book title says. It's exactly what to say in certain situations. I just wish I would have had this in Chinese so that it would have said, okay, if you find yourself in this type of scenario, here's what you do and here's what you say. And just really short, crisp, clear lessons telling me, like, hey, if you're trying to deal with a Chinese manufacturer and you're trying to figure out pricing, like, here's what you do and here's what you say, and here's, some background, like why, like here's how to understand the situation and why they might not be giving you a straight answer when you're asking straight questions. Well, here's why that might be happening, and so this is what you do and this is what you do. Like,
Yeah, that's actually a great title for my next book. Exactly what to say in every situation in China.
yeah, like seriously, like that's the book that I wish I would have had in China, because I kept finding myself in these situations where I was like, am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I handling this the right way? I don't know, because I grew up in Los Angeles and here I am in China, and I just don't know if I'm doing it the right way. But I keep thinking back to this one situation where I had a client, or a potential client, and she called us and she said she wanted our services. And then we went over and we talked about our services and pricing. And I know they were big enough to afford us, but then they just started like pushing back and trying to wheel and deal. And then we were saying, okay, here's this package and here's how it is. And I remember sitting in a room and she would not make eye contact with us. And we were just like, do you want to do this or not? And she's like, it's hard to say yes. And I was like, what does that mean? It's hard to say yes. Like, just tell us yes or no, I'm interested or not, or here's what we need to do to change this deal. And I just could not communicate with her. I mean, she spoke English, but I could not, we weren't connecting brain to brain somehow. The words we were using were like going past each other. And I was like, I know I'm missing some cultural element here and I'm handling this the wrong way, but I had no clue how to handle it the right way. And like, that's the moment that I wish I would have had some sort of guide, a book or something that could have told me like, here's why this situation is going the way it's going, and here's what you need to do to fix this.
Yeah, well, that's actually exactly what my content addresses.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now
And I
for
think
that,
it just,
yeah,
you know, this title, I mean, this is great, right? Exactly what to say. Like, that's literally what it is. Whereas, you know, after the Chinese honeymoon, discover the realities of modern Chinese culture, you know, that's harder to know what exactly it's talking about and who it's for, right?
right. Right. So, yeah, so that's again, are those two, are they separate books where I just write a exactly what to say book? And, or do I write a follow-up to
I
the
think
first
you can
book?
write an exactly what to say type of book, but put stories in it to illustrate the points. But I think it would be organized by points to say, here are 20 different situations that you're highly likely to find yourself in China that are going to be challenging. And here's what you do in each of these situations. And then you could have put stories in there to kind of illustrate, like, one time I was in China and this happened and this, and then there's the lesson in that story.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you, Josh. Look forward to starting these back up.
Yeah, me too. I'm so glad that folks showed up. And John, I see you came in. I wasn't watching. I don't know exactly when you popped in, but I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions that you might have. John, if you want to pop in and say something, I'll allow you to talk. And Jean, good to see you.
Sure.
John, did you want to?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, are there any questions that are itching for you, or where are you at with things?
At the very beginning, just starting, and I'd been working on my doctoral research, and I was wondering if there might be a way in which to take some of that work and parts of the dissertation, or repackage that in some way in order to have a published book, since I'm already doing a lot of work there. It just seemed like it was kind of a natural fit. And I feel like I followed you since, forever. And I was part of the original class, but I wasn't able to really attend then. Life circumstances changed a little bit, so I have a little more free time now. And so glad to jump back in here and just start to learn and figure it out.
Awesome. Well, glad that you're returning along with all of us. So what's your dissertation about?
So right now, the focus is on cyber risk quantification. It's a problem in the space. No one has figured it out. Cyber liability insurance, they kind of throw darts in the dark, trying to make sense of how much to charge people. And then ultimately, decisions about how do you determine if you should like self-insure or, transfer your liability externally through cyber liability insurance. But more importantly, how do you make investment decisions for your business? How do you know from a risk management based perspective, what are the things we should focus on? How do we do the investment? And really, what does that mean for our risk exposure?
This sounds very relevant to things going on today. That's my first thought. I mean, because there are a lot of corporations and governments getting into big trouble with cyber risk and stuff that's going on. I read these stories all the time about companies and city governments, county governments, state governments being held hostage by hackers and stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a real problem. No one has really quite figured it out. I think the challenge that we have too is even at the board level, it's really hard to have a conversation because you don't have comparable units by which to make comparative decision making, right? So there isn't this standardized approach right now to how do you determine your risk exposure on a cyber perspective, and then you can't, in a quantitatively comparative manner, know what that means as it relates to where you should spend or what type of risk reduction it'll create for you or your company, or even more importantly, how much protection do you get by that spend, right? Because I think that's the inverse question that most people want to know as well.
Right. Because, yeah, I mean, if you've got a $200 million company and somebody can come in and wipe out all your systems, what is that going to cost to get up and running again? What are you looking at? Because literally somebody could take your entire business down and put you out of business. And yeah, there are a lot of questions there. So does your research shed light on this then? I mean, are you solving this problem with your research, or is your research more about the problem?
Well, the goal is to try and make some inroads on the problem via the research, right? I don't know if I'll fully solve it. It's a pretty big problem. But like most good things, you try to chip away at it and see what you can do there. I think the goal with the book is to use the book as a way for personal branding, personal and professional branding. Obviously, if it can sell, great. But also, I enjoy speaking at conferences, and I've spoken at a lot of national conferences, and so the book could be a way in which to help retain additional speaking engagements and things of that sort. And so really just trying to figure out, where does the book fit? How can I marry some of the work that I'm doing today to potentially translate that into a book that people would be interested in? And then ultimately how to kind of create the tribe to go with that and just grow and expand from there. Because at some point it'd be nice to get out of the corporate rat race and have some other ways that you can give back to others and help others and educate and still make a living.
Mm-hmm. The great thing about where you're at is that this isn't the first time that an academic has taken their dissertation and turned it into a book, right? So you've got a lot of people who have done this before that you can look at for examples of how they did it successfully. Are there any other researchers who have taken their research and turned it into a book that you could go talk to and get their experiences from?
There's a couple, but I don't think I would consider what they did very successful with the book.
Mm-hmm.
One of them more or less took their dissertation and slapped a cover on it, and magically we have a book. Well, no, I don't think that's quite the same. The formal academic writing is going to be different than what someone, like a corporate executive that's trying to grapple with the question and figure it out. That's a far different type of writing, and the way that you're going to communicate to them is going to be different than, if you're an academic researcher that loves reading, very rote, dry, technical prose.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I worked with Bob Kaplan at Harvard Business School on a case study. So I bought his book. This thing's huge. Like, this is still way too academic. The thing that Bob did right, though, is he did create a framework that people can use in a set of steps to implement what he was talking about. And that's definitely something that your book's going to have. This is what I often just refer to as your thing. What is the thing? Which is the answer to the question, great, I've read this guy's book. What do I actually do? There needs to be a series of steps, a formula, some sort of plan to follow to achieve success. Because if it's just a book about, hey, there's this issue and there's this problem and here's how to understand this problem, but there's no action to take away from it, it's not going to do as well. Is there a series of steps that that is already in the dissertation or that you could apply to it to say, here's what corporations can do, here's how they can take something away from this and go through these steps to get XYZ results?
So I think that's part of the ultimate goal here, is to be able to have a way that you can quantify your risk to be able to make decisions internally, right? Like, how do you take things like data points or risk management data that you have internally, how can you translate that into some type of standardized measure by which you can start to make decisions with? So yes, that's a long way of saying yes. That's the goal, is to have some way they can take that and take action on.
Okay. But is that something that you have mapped out, or that's in your mind? Like, I mean,
So
if I asked you what those steps are, could you tell me, oh, there are these 5 steps to go through, or?
no, not yet. I don't have all those mapped out.
Okay. So I think that would be a great place to start, because once you have that, you can build the book around that. Covey has his 7 habits of highly successful people. There are all sorts of different books that have a system or a set of steps or a formula or whatever. And it doesn't really matter if it's steps or systems or formulas or what it is. It just has to be something that is actionable. There has to be some sort of takeaway from it. But that becomes the core of your book. And then the rest of it, your research, fits into that structure. Rather than saying, I've got all this research, how do I take the research and make it actionable? Figure out what the steps are, and then look at your research and say, here's where I can plug in different pieces of my research to support these steps or this formula. Does that make sense?
It does. That's a great idea. So thank you.
And then those steps, or whatever the formula is, that really becomes the outline of your book. Those become the chapters. So you've got your introduction, then you introduce the formula as a whole, and then it's, okay, now I'm going to go through these steps and explain each one and how you do it. And then you explain each one and how you do it. And then you wrap it up and you give people some sort of tool or something too is useful. I mean, that's what is great about this book, about strategy maps. And Bob wrote Balanced Scorecard. So he created this tool, Balanced Scorecard, that's used by all these corporations all over the place today, because that tool makes it really easy. If there's some sort of tool that you can create to say, here's this table, here's how you fill it in, and this will help you to quantify your risk, or this will tell you what you need to do or what you need to buy in terms of insurance or whatever. But something that executives can look at and say, from an executive standpoint, hey, I get this. I understand risk. I understand insurance. I understand that cyber risk is a thing, that we could be hacked and these problems could happen. And so here's my tool to quantify all that risk and get this number. And then here's the steps to take that and implement a plan to reduce our risk, or to get insurance to insure against it, or whatever it is. But that seems like that would be huge. I mean, every business there's some sort of limit there. I mean, if it's a $3 million business, people aren't really thinking about that at that level. But it seems like people get to 20, 30, 50 million, and anything above that, then they need some sort of plan or insurance or something in place, just the same way that they would have fire insurance or liability insurance or something. I mean, your book could be kind of a spark to really support a whole industry here. I mean, I'm assuming there's cyber risk insurance already out there, isn't there?
There is. It's still fairly young and it continues to evolve. But the ability to, in a very quantifiable way, consistent, reliable way, right? There's still a lot of, I would say, the art versus the science in some of that, right? So you might have a question like, do you employ endpoint protection measures? That might be what the cyber liability insurance company asks you to respond to. And you're either going to say yes or no, and then usually there's some more nuance to it. But the extent to which you can have binary clear answers, that helps drive the quantification. The problem is we have a lot of non-binary answers that exist as part of the risk management process and understanding risk. And I think that's part of the disconnect that exists today. And there's some really complicated models like the FAIR methodology. That's almost like go get a bachelor's degree to understand how to implement that in your company, let alone try to explain that to an executive. And so that just doesn't seem like that's a successful route. And so the idea is we got to figure out how can we have something that's more quantifiable, maybe more objective, less, artful, and still drive it forward in a way that's tangible and usable, right? Because at the end of the day, you got to have the executives to be able to understand it, and then they have to be comfortable with it to be able to make decisions on it. And I think that's part of the challenge practitioners face in the real world today, is that most of the models are either so complicated and confusing that you can't really explain it, or it's like licking your finger and putting it in the air to gauge the wind direction. You kind of have the two opposite ends there. And what we really need here is something that's more in the middle to really help people move forward. And then as other parts of the industry of cyber risks continue to develop, I think that will, this might very much help force them to develop faster. And then together this can evolve over time.
Mm-hmm. That really is the challenge for academics, right? Is to distill something that is complicated into something that even a business executive can understand, right? There's such a gap there, and that takes some talent, some work to distill those parts out. But that's part of the great thing about coming up with that formula or system or tool or something, is that it makes it more accessible. I mean, Stephen R. Covey was an academic. He figured this out and obviously did quite well with it. Clayton Christensen, with his model of innovative disruption, figured out how to make that simple and rode that wave and did very well with it. And there are two things I wanted to bring up. One thing is, I keep harping on this: what is the problem that you're solving? And I think that's important here with your book. What is the problem that you solve? What do you fix? What is it that people are worried about that you can help fix? But there's another side of it, which is, how can you help people make money? And I would think about not just the executives or the corporations as your audience, but also these insurance companies. Is there a way to write a book that lays out the risk clearly and the value of insuring against that risk clearly, such that insurance companies might help promote your book and say, hey, this book really explains things so well, so clearly, that the insurance companies are buying your book and sending it out to potential clients and saying, hey, read this book and then you'll understand why you need to buy our cyber risk insurance. And maybe it's not insurance companies, but that type of strategy of thinking, who would want to help promote my book because it promotes their interests, that's one way to get the book out into the hands of the right people in a little bit roundabout way, a little bit indirect way, but it might be something that's very fruitful for you.
Yeah, that's a fascinating idea. Let me think on that some more. Yeah, because there could be some opportunity space there with the insurance companies. There's also a couple, I would say, smaller technology startup type companies that are just starting to get in this space as well. And so from a commercial product standpoint, there might be some opportunity with a company like that where you could partner or something on that order.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I think it sounds like the next step is figuring out your thing, your tool, your formula, your system, your steps, whatever it is, and figuring out what that is and putting something down on paper. Does that sound like the next step to you?
It does.
Okay, cool. Well, I don't know if you're going to be able to show up next week, but if you want to work on that and bring it back next week and let's talk about it, that would be fantastic. Or just whenever you can attend again, I'd love to take a look at that.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, John. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll wrap it up there. Thanks, John, Catherine, Kurt, everybody else who was on, and anybody else watching this later. And we'll have this again next week and on an ongoing basis. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.